growing up analog in a digital world. Now, there are many YouTube, musicians, guitar players especially, that are purely analog. That's all they want to hear is analog tube amps. They won't listen to anything else. They think, there's a famous YouTuber, well known, well loved, and deservedly so. But he says you can't get, the same tone out of what is essentially cell phone parts. And, that's an argument, I guess. But look, here is the reality. A cell phone is a computer. A cell phone is a camera. A cell phone is a recording device. A cell phone is your own personal computer. Computers are powerful things. Computers can operate software. Computers can analyze something and replicate it. And, look, here's the thing. I was born in an analog world. My old school Fender amps. And, back in the day, we had nothing but analog pedals, tape delays. I think eventually Electro Harmonix came out with their Memory Man. It was very much a analog world, and it was probably about mid '80s when I got my first digital delay pedal. Now, the old school guys that I had played in a cover band with, I had replaced a guy who was like a biker. And he was old school, right? And they hired this young kid. I was this young kid. And, I'm playing in this band with guys that are in their late 30s, early 40s. And this is pre-moving to Los Angeles and playing on the Sunset Strip. I'm playing this gig 5 nights a week. I'm making $250 a week. And these were old school guys, man. And the guy I had replaced had a tape echo. And they kept telling me, oh, you got to get a tape echo. You got to get a tape echo. Well, even back in, I don't know where it was, 85, I think it was. They weren't that easy to come by. They weren't easy to maintain. I had an old Univox tape echo, just like the one Eddie Van Halen used at the end of Eruption, right? But it had broken. The tapes had worn out, and and all of that. And man, where I grew up in Virginia, I had to drive an hour just to get to a decent music store. They didn't sell tape delay units. They had whatever was available at the time. So at the time, I think I got one of the first Boss digital delays. Now, I don't remember what the model of it was, but, that's what I would use for delay. And to my ears, because I had, it was what I was available to me, and I had fresh ears at the time. I wasn't a tone master when I was 18, 19 years old. I was more about shredding and doing things that kids do. But I liked the digital delay at the time, and I thought, I want to hear my delays sound exactly like what I just played. And so it did just that. And, by today's standards, it would be considered a primitive digital delay, but I was okay with embracing this. But of course, the old school guys in the top 40 band, they kept saying, you need a tape delay, you need to get a tape delay. And, I get it now because, obviously with all the emulations out there and all the, stuff out there, you can see the glorious sound of a tape delay. I mean, you get an old full tone tape delay, they sound amazing. They're a bit of a pain in the ass, to operate and finicky and, all that kind of stuff. But yes, tape delay or even a, Electro Harmonix Memory Man Those old ones, man, they sound incredible. And I had one of those for a while when I was in Nashville, and I used it. It was a great sounding delay. But I've seen a lot of technology come and go. And, I've tried everything along the way. Perhaps the first modeling unit of some sort was the Rockman, the old, Walkman style box Rockman with you plug in your headphones and your guitar and you could flick a couple switches and get a couple of different tones. It was the first time I ever heard stereo guitar in my headphones. And I thought it was the most glorious thing, but after a while of playing that, it all started to sound kind of the same. It wasn't something that you could sit for me and practice for hours because it did feel like, okay, I'm hearing this sound, but it's kind of the same sound, and it didn't have as much dynamics as, say, playing through my little Fender, tube amp. But, here's the reality, man. Some of these same people who say that tube amps are the only way to go, and you can't get a good tone out of a cell phone and all this kind of stuff. Some of those same people are using digital pedals on their rig, things like the Line 6, was it M13 or M5 or whatever it is, M1. I don't even remember the model names. Let me know in the comments. But some of these people have used these things on their pedal board, these emulations, these digital emulations of effects. Guys like Uncle Larry have used them on their pedal board for over a decade at least. I mean, and I've heard them say in comments, I listen with my ears. I don't listen with my eyes, and to my ears, it sounds good. So essentially, they're using digital technology to do a similar thing to what people are using modelers for. And I just demoed a budget modeler on my channel. And man, I got some really good tones out of it, but there's always going to be somebody who's just going to dismiss it because it's digital and it's not a real amp and all that. But man, here's the thing, man. Real amps are noisy. Real amps are finicky. Real amps don't always sound the same depending on what power supply you're plugging it into. Real amps can be noisy, and the more gain pedals and compression and things that you throw in front of the amp can amplify the noise. I can get a completely quiet tone that immediately, once you play it, you're getting, 90% of your guitar signal, as opposed to an amp where, there might be this terrible hum that's going on, or a blanket over the tone, or the amp's having a bad day, or the filter caps are getting ready to go, or any number of things that can happen. And here's the other reality. I live in a home with my family. I can't fire up those tube amps and get them to a volume where it sounds good. The neighbors are going to hear it. My wife and child are going to wake up in the middle of the night. Sometimes I want to go play my guitar. What do you do? Well, I put on my headphones and I grab a little modeler and I plug into it, and I'm able to play, and I'm able to dial up tones super fast. The studio guys would like you to think that you can't get a good tone without, going into a $500,000 studio and using a $1,000 mic and, and using two mics and using your tube amp and your analog pedals. And, but I happen to have a digital pedal on my pedal board. They'd like you to think that all of that is necessary because that's what feeds their industry. They want you to hire them for their superior tone. And in a lot of cases, they want you to hire them for their superior tone. They want you to, covet their, vintage gear and their vintage guitars and all that. But, here's the reality, man. All things are viable. All things have their place. And man, I cannot, even if my family loved me cranking up tube amps in my house and miking them up, and they just love the sound of a roaring 412, I couldn't get tones, unless I had, $10,000 worth of gear. I couldn't get tones equal to some of the stuff that I can get on a $200 box. And that is absolute reality. And man, when I send people tracks and I play on people's stuff, ultimately they don't care what I used to play on the track. They care what it sounds like. They care what it feels like. They care about hearing the human behind the track. And guitar is an analog instrument, but it is entering into the digital world. And, the reality is this, man. A lot of the people that tout, I don't use this and I don't use that. They all have a digital delay on their board. They all have something digital in their signal. They're all recording to digital. They're all, doing something that, and here's the thing. Even if you are Mr. Analog, your work is all being converted into digital. So you're going to try to tell me that, and here's the thing. Most people are listening to the work that you did on a cell phone. Most people are listening to you play your analog guitar that's unmiked in the room through a tube amp. Most of them are listening on their cell phone. The very thing that you're saying you can't get an amp tone out of cell phone parts. It's not cell phone parts. This is not a flip phone. The reality is it's a computer. And my phone is probably more powerful now than the computer that I do most of my editing on. And man, technology is moving at a rapid pace. And things are coming super fast. It's at the point now where I'm hesitant to buy into a platform, say something like the Quad Cortex or the Helix that's been out for a long time. The Quad Cortex has been out for a long time. The Tone Master Pro has been out for a couple of years. I'm hesitant to buy into these because I'm waiting to see what comes next. In my mind, I'm thinking, man, for right now, go with something that sounds great at a low budget, because the next big budget, big ticket item is coming down the pike, and you don't want to be holding old technology, holding on to tons of tube amps, as glorious as they are. I've got two right here. I don't know how much longer I'm going to keep them because, frankly, I'm not using them. And, I don't like keeping gear around that I'm not using. And it's just not practical for me to mic up those amps and throw a mic on it and try to get an incredible studio tone that's processed and sounds the way it needs to be. And then it just gets squashed down to digital and somebody listens to it on their phone. That is the reality that we live in now. No matter if you're the most analog, old school guy there is, your sound, your signal is getting converted to digital, whether you like it or not. Unless you've got a tape machine in your house and you're listening to vinyl exclusively and you don't own a cell phone, and then therefore you're not listening to this message. But you're right now listening to this message, and you're listening to it probably on a cell phone or maybe on your TV. And guess what? It's digital. We're analog people that now live in a digital world. And that's just the way it is, man. That's the way it is. And it's okay if you don't want to embrace those technology. It's okay if what you want to use is a tube amp. But for a lot of us out there, it's just not simply an option.